have Sevilla here with me. She is a licensed clinical social worker. She's licensed in Alaska, North Carolina, and as well as Florida, and she lives in Florida right now. Welcome. Anything else you would like to add?
Hi. Just that I provide coaching and consultation also. I'm a grief and loss specialist, and I also provide coaching to women and men in the context of relationship where they're working to start their lives over. Often people who are dating those that have been widowed. There can be a lot of complications with relationship like that. And then I provide relationship guidance and coaching also.
Before I started recording, we were talking. We're having an incredible conversation. I was telling Sevilla about myself, about my journey, why I have this podcast now, and what the intention behind it is. And I was telling her a little bit about where I started, which is I have a background in acting, in the media, and that was the entirety of my 20s. And you know, part of me looking back also thinks that I was chasing fame. And when I was telling her all these things, I know you started saying some things and I said, I want to start recording. So that's where I want to start. We all have our journey, right? We've made mistakes. We are who we are. And yeah, part of me is thankful for all the mistakes that I've made, the journey that I've been on to be where I am today. And can you speak a little bit more about that? How to, in a sense, look at yourself, look at your past self with kindness rather than maybe a little bit of judgment, which is what I tend to do sometimes.
And what I was wanting to start saying is that, let me preface it with this. One of the things I also provide is bringing in a spiritual component to all the client work that I do. So it's whether it's with my psychotherapy clients and they're working on grief, bringing that piece of spirituality into it's always very important. And for their healing, and that's based on what their worldview might be. But one of the things I find that when people go through major life transformations, like a death or something that completely upends their life completely, that bringing that spiritual component into it helps them to be able to get outside the mundane or even the limits of psychotherapy. Here's a trick, here's a tool, here's a best practice that you can use to be able to fix this problem that you have. And I think that and this isn't to denigrate any of those things. However, I think that when you can up-level those and bring people into the metaphysical, meaning the beyond the physical, or that which is beyond ourselves, for whatever that means for the client, can help to give a bigger and better perspective on what it is they're really trying to accomplish or what phase of their life they're moving into and how to find happiness, wellness, and wholeness again. So I have a better opportunity to do that with coaching clients because I have a little more freedom to speak freely with coaching clients, and also on my YouTube channel, which also has a spiritual component to it. So I'm prefacing the answer I want to give you with this because I want to give a little history there. So what I want to say to you is that your history of working in film and media isn't something that you should leave behind. And I think you know that on a deeper level. It's something that you're going to incorporate with what you're doing. And you're doing it now, right? Where you're doing an interview here, you've got your Instagram. All of these things are pieces of you. And it's going to continue to open the door for you. Like if you look at Alex Ferrari, and he's got his Next Level Soul podcast, and it's growing like gangbusters. He had a history where he was going into filmmaking, and he was going to do this, he was going to do that, and he had a very strong drive, had a lot of adventures in that, had some great successes, but ultimately wasn't his path. And that's a big example if we're looking at like the social media world. But I think that what you've done is just moving you into this next phase of your life. So now you're getting your degree in marriage and family therapy. There's a draw that you had there to be able to serve humanity in this way. Is drawing you towards relationship, but you're also seeing things that, there's got to be something more. And so you're setting yourself up to be able to investigate the more. What's that next level? And bringing people in with different perspectives and different ways of thinking and being is, clearly going to help you drive that message. And so each person that you meet is going to take you to the next level, open up that next door, and the next door, and the next door. So everything that you've built the foundation on, even though you had this drive for fame, I think a lot of times we go for the egoic drive. But when we come into our spiritual calling for what we're here for in this earth, the egoic part of it may fall away, but doesn't lack value. It doesn't lack value. It's kind of like money, right? Money is an energy. So it's not evil in and of itself. And if we look to money and say, oh gosh, those douchebags with all the money, well, all we're doing is putting in negative energy and telling the universe, I don't want any money because obviously it's bad, so keep it away from me, if we're denigrating everybody with money. But the truth is, money can do great things in the world. It can have an incredible impact on helping people to live better lives, lifting up the poor, being able to sponsor things, having a positive influence when it's done from a positive energetic stance, where the money then becomes the energy for love and positive influence in the world. And so I'm using that to connect this with a drive for fame. So this fame also can be a beautiful, powerful,
Absolutely.
positive influence in the world. And so I would say don't give it up. Release the egoic part of it as you move forward. I hear that you're doing that. You've been doing that. But to be able to release that, but hold the drive, because you're meant for that as well. There's also purpose in that. And I love that when you came into this with this humble perspective. Like, I don't care how many people see this. 4 people, 5 people, like 10,000, a million. It doesn't matter, because when you reach one person, all we ever need to do is reach just one, because that's the ripple effect. And you don't have to even know where it goes. You just have to know that you did it. Just have to know that you did it. And it doesn't matter what you do, but that you know that you're the only one who can do it in the way you can do it, the way you can say it, the way you can express it, because you're like this unique puzzle piece in the universe. And you were created and designed for something very specific. And it's not better or less than anybody else, but it's specifically and uniquely yours. Like an animal species, right? We can't say a bee is less important than the wolves in Yellowstone, because they took the wolves out of Yellowstone and the deer took over and started ruining everything, right? So they had to put the wolves back in Yellowstone because they upset the balance. So that's how important you are. So we have those drives. It's like, I think it's just finding that balance. And it's true for each one of us, And so it's exciting what you're doing. And because it matters. It absolutely matters. And you're right. It doesn't matter how many people you reach. When I started my YouTube channel, which is very small in the YouTube universe, my channel is very small. I have like 4,700 subscribers and like, I don't know, 400,000 views or something like that. But for me, when I look at that, I go, wow, imagine standing in a room and 4,000 people are looking at you and listening to what you have to say. I think we really minimize and dehumanize the numbers and the likes because they just become this digital data.
Yeah.
But those are actual human beings, hopefully. They're not bots, but for the most part, they're actual human beings behind the likes and the views. And that one person you reach is a mother, is a father, is a daughter. There's somebody with a whole life. And if you can reach that person and influence them in any kind of positive way that makes their life a little bit better, guarantee you when you cross over and it's your time to leave this world and you have that opportunity to review every minute detail of your existence that's recorded in eternity, and you see the connection that you have with everyone else and the influence that you had with everyone else, whether you knew it or not. It's going to be part of your true value, your true riches that you get to take with you.
You are so incredibly spiritual. I can tell. You have this ability to see the bigger picture, and you have so much compassion, acceptance, but also belief in life as it is, universe as it is, and you're not fighting anything. There's no, I don't see that there's an internal struggle within you that most of us have. I know you spoke of grief. I know you spoke of loss. For me, change of careers was the loss in my life. And I laugh. I laugh because it's not like losing a loved one. I understand. I understand there is a difference. But for me, I lost my sense of self. I absolutely lost the track, the path that I was on. But I want to ask you, how have you gotten to this point where there is nothing but utter acceptance and belief in the internal world within you and the outside world?
Well, that's a big question because I could look at a whole lifetime of experiences. I had the benefit of being born into a metaphysical family, meaning that my father was a seeker of knowledge and information, and they explored nothing. Nothing was off limits. They explored everything, and so my family was the hub of a metaphysical community in Alaska, where I grew up. And so I was introduced to all different world religions. We'd have speakers come into our home and into our community, talking about things from mediumship to the perspective of whatever religion might have been wanting to talk that week. And so in different ways of exploring, always from the internal self to the external. So I was brought up to see myself as a spiritual being having a human experience, and that it was always within me, not external to me. And so I had that benefit, maybe an advantage. I think a lot of people do come to that at some point in their life. They may come to it in their adulthood. I just had that benefit there. So that gave me the opportunity to study meditation, working with energy, at a very young age. So going into my adulthood, of course I had these struggles like anyone else, struggling with the ego. I mean, I think when I was a child, I wanted to be an actress, right? That was like the biggest thing. I just couldn't imagine anything better. And as I grew, I realized I was going to make a terrible actress because I couldn't remember any lines. And I had a terrible memory, very ADD, and it was bad. I got fired from a play once. So that wasn't going to work out. I also had the desire all my life to do and be a therapist. And so that was my desire when I was in high school, and I had a certain path and plan that I was going to take, and that didn't pan out. But over the course of my young adult and my young adult life, I went through a series of losses. And by the age of 42, I'd lost both my parents, lost two brothers, best friends, cousins, coworkers, clients, and a multitude of other people. I had an incredible amount of loss by an early age. If you live long enough, you'll lose all those people. But it happened to me very young. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the process of losing someone, crossing over from here to there, makes such a huge impact on a person. But nothing hit me harder than the loss of my husband when I was 42. My husband was an Alaska commercial fisherman, and he fell off his commercial fishing boat he was the captain of, and he drowned. And leaving me alone with my 3.5-year-old son. I had to start my life all over again. So that, I think, was a very pivotal moment in time in my life where I was all alone. I didn't have parents to go home to. I didn't have mom to cry to. I was living in a rural village in Alaska that takes 2 airplane rides to get to, or the ocean, definitely no roads. And a couple of beautiful stepdaughters that were young adults that were moving on into their lives, and I had to re-navigate. Now, I had always been a voracious reader, and anything I read has always been self-help oriented. So you mentioned this, how do you live from this inside place and be in a state of non-resistance to the world? That's coming to a very deep understanding that I can control for nothing. Because I've been hit in the head with it so powerfully too many times. Too many times I thought I had the world by the horns, and it was ripped out from underneath me through death. Death is one of the most powerful teachers, which is why I specialize in grief and loss. One of the most powerful teachers is why Buddhist monks will go sit in the cemetery and meditate all night on the gravestones. Right? The illusion of this life having any more value than the present moment offers us. And so I've had a lot of great teachers in that regard over the course of my lifetime. Eckhart Tolle has been a fantastic teacher to millions of people around the world, and he's the author of The Power of Now, amongst many other books that he's written, and many other ways that he's reached humanity. Not the only teacher, many, many good ones, but he was one that was quite influential to me early on, and I was fortunate to read The Power of Now in the year prior to my husband's death. So that helped me to be able to lean into the reality of the present moment and where I was at. But that doesn't mean I moved through it with perfect smoothness. It's like, I was still in a state of resistance to a lot of things in my life. And I think one of the things that helped me move even more into being in a state of flow is the following relationship that I got into after my husband died. Found my next husband. And I had a history of being with what I would call very difficult men. And was always finding myself in this state of resistance and struggle in the relationship. So I say this also because it's important, because your question was, how did you get into this state of flow and non-resistance? Each of these things become the teacher. Death became the teacher. Relationship became the teacher. Because it gets to a point where it's so miserable, whether it's the death or the relationship, that something has to change. And once you realize that it might be you, right? You look at yourself and you say, maybe it's me. Because Eckhart Tolle says we'll be in relationship and we'll have struggle and we'll blame the other person for it, almost always. Does it mean that person's without flaw? No. But the reality is, in any situation, there's 3 things we can do. Leave the situation. Maybe we can change it. But those things aren't always possible. Sometimes we're on an airplane and having a panic attack. We're not getting off that airplane, are we, right? It's like, you ain't going nowhere. Or radically accept it. And sometimes those 3 things might work in combination with each other. Or one can be done at a time. So these are things I've had to practice. And learning how to be in the state of non-resistance, which has always brought me back to myself. What can I control for?
I know you said you can't control anything, right? And this reminds me of, I don't know if you listen to Sadhguru. One of the things that he talks about is identity, how we identify with so much around us, right? Whether it's a relationship or a job or wealth, anything external. And those are the things that we cannot control. Those are the things that are outside of our control. Now imagine if your entire identity has been what you cannot control. if your entire identity has been your career, which for me it was my identity, who I was in this world, what I wanted to do, it was all my career. And so imagine that's the case and that gets taken away. Imagine what you're left with. And do you think that was your journey, that you just learned to say, that's not me, that's not me, that's not me? Those are external things. What is me is this internal world that I can control, what happens within me. And this is what Sadhguru says. You cannot control what happens outside. Don't even try. But what happens within you, you can control. What happens within you, not only can you control, what happens within you is your responsibility.
The end of your life, if you listen to near-death studies and stories, which I've listened to hundreds of thousands, the one thing that's similar in all of them is that no one is ever asked, what did the world do to you? We're held in love and compassion for whatever our experience is, but no one ever asks that of us. What did the world do to you? It's always, what did you do with the world, with those that you encountered? What did you do with yourself? How did you treat your body? How did you treat those around you? And it wasn't how much fame you had or how much money you had. There was a great near-death experience I heard when I was very young. And she said that she recognized that in her near-death experience, even though she had many worldly accolades, lots of honors, I mean, just things that we would strive for, she had in abundance. And in her life review, she realized that the one best, most marvelous thing she'd ever done in her life was to give a boy with disabilities who was stuck in the middle of a baseball field, I think in a wheelchair, on a very hot day. And she brought him a glass of water. That was the most marvelous thing she'd ever done in her entire life, ever. If we'd held that up against, if you ask the average person, what's the greatest thing we've ever done? It wouldn't have, most people wouldn't say that. But that's what the heavens opened up and sang about for her.
But you know, a lot of us are stuck in this what the world did to us phase. Now, I don't know if it's a phase that you get over or it's just something that you went through, but how do you not get jaded? How do you not get angry at the world? Because the world does some cruel things. people, world, life, right? It gets really difficult. And so how do you not get angry at the universe, the world, people?
Well, I think you can get angry about it. And perhaps anger has a place and a purpose in that perhaps that makes somebody fight for justice or to protect those that might be harmed. So there's a purpose and a usefulness in anger. Sitting in anger ultimately doesn't serve us. Now, people will live in that for as long as it feels useful or valuable to them. If it makes them feel more powerful, or if it makes them feel protected from the world by sitting in anger, because maybe that keeps everything out for them. But eventually, that needs to fall away. And if it doesn't fall away in this lifetime, then that either holds them back in their spiritual progression, or it falls away after they die and they realize they wasted a lot of time sitting in anger when they could have been doing something else with it. Because as Sadhguru, as you mentioned, said that it's all external to you. So when somebody has been victimized by a horrible crime, which I've also had a lot of victimization in my lifetime, we can sit and see ourselves as a victim to the world, or we can see it from a different perspective, which is, if I'm a spiritual being having a human experience, and this world is here to be my teacher, is there any possibility that there could be something useful for me from this horrible experience? Could I find my own sense of resilience? Could I see that I've got an incredible amount of strength within me. But I see myself being able to transform this energy of anger or hate or feeling victimized, transform that energy into something else, something more effective, something more profitable to humanity. And so since I've had like an incredible amount of loss in my life by an early age, I always like to preface early age because I don't want to sound like I've had more loss than other people. There's lots of 80-year-olds running around with way more loss than I've had, and people who live in war-torn countries. So there's no comparison. This is just my story. But to be able to take that grief and then transform it into something else, can we transform it into something loving? And if we can transform it into love, because it's all the same energy, it's just holding a different mask. Because if we're angry, we're protecting the self inside, the vulnerable self. Protecting the vulnerable self. And where's our vulnerability? Our vulnerability is where my tender heart full of love is. And I want to save that for people who won't hurt me. So we'll just stay angry. Now some people stay so angry that self inside that has all that love never gets to express itself, because if we're not giving it, we're not getting it. It's our job to give love. We're not here to get it. We're here to give it. And then we naturally, hopefully, will be able to receive it. But I do recognize there's people that are in this world living in the most extraordinarily bad circumstances that we probably can't even imagine the suffering of. And yet there's this incredible possibility of gratitude that can come even in the most ugly of places. I mean, look at the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, extremely famous book. He lived through the Holocaust and the worst of it. And if you read that book, recognize the spark of consciousness that one can hold even in the midst of the worst of human suffering. And could we choose that? We choose that.
Absolutely.
It's an option.
I remember reading it before I started graduate school. And the spark of consciousness that you speak of, that's pretty much what he held on to, right? From how he describes his experience, from, remembering his wife, who at that time he did not know was alive or not. He had no idea. She had been separated from him. And at that point, he had no idea if she was alive or not. But images of her, memories of her, the vision of her is what kept him going, along with the vision of how this experience that he was going through might be of service to something, whether to himself or to other people, to whatever, that meaning might come out of this painful experience. Do you believe in reincarnation?
I do. I've been through periods of, I grew up believing in reincarnation, then I went through a period in my adulthood where I didn't believe in it anymore. And I thought, because everything's unique, then it can't repeat itself. So coming back into another body wouldn't be in alignment with each and everything being 100% unique. But there's just too much dang evidence for reincarnation not to be true and not to be part of the journey of the soul. Now, some people might say that well, we're all essentially one, and so reincarnation really is just a memory of tapping into some other soul's existence that they had. We're tapping into the matrix and reading their storyline and believing it's our own. That's what some other people have said. That's why it's not real. But again, I would say there's just too much evidence, in my opinion.
If the goal of this life is soul expansion, our soul is here to learn. I mean, if certain things we don't learn, like you mentioned, if we hold on to anger has a place, anger serves a purpose, but there might be a point we're holding on to it and it's not serving it's not serving us anymore, and we continue to hold on to it out of spite, out of who knows what else. So at the end of the life, there's regret of, I spent too much time just holding on to this anger when I could have released it and been guided by something else other than anger. I don't know what that is. Something else could be love, desire to serve, desire to find meaning. And so if that thought process is happening at the end of life, and your soul is like, oh, well, we gotta come back and do it all over again. Isn't that what reincarnation is? Like you come in a different body, different body, but with the desire to learn this lesson again, with the desire to maybe go through some of these experiences and learn lesson. And by no means am I saying that the hardships people go through in life are things that they signed up for. I'm not going that far. Maybe it's far-fetched, maybe it's not. But wouldn't it make sense that your soul signs up for some of these things?
It's my personal bias that we do sign up for things. I think something that people struggle with in that regard is why, or I would never sign up for this, because we're seeing the world through our egoic perspective, which is very limited to this is all that's important. Me, this experience I had, this victimization, this struggle. Why would I ever sign up for that? And I can't answer that question for any one particular person. I could only speak for myself. That's an individual journey that person will need to take if it's a question that they feel compelled to search into. But I believe it's true. And part of that is going through this veil of forgetfulness. And why do we forget before we come in? You're going to give me a job, I need to know what the goal is. Okay, you need to produce this, affect that, get this much outcome. That's your job. And you go to do that. You have understanding going in before you accept the job, what you're committing to. Why would that be different with the soul coming into this lifetime? Why do we have to forget? And if you look at people who remember a past life, like children, for example, you could look at some stories of children. And I think there's what's it called? Living with Ghosts? It was a special, might have been on Netflix, not sure, about children who have these really powerful memories of a past life. And it tortures them. They are traumatized from the past life experience that they are living with every day. They're having horrible nightmares. They have this a lack of a sense of self. They are constantly in a state of confusion about who they are, and they have a frustration of not being the adult. They're this child in this body, and it's torture on so many levels. And I think these are examples of why we would need to forget. So how is it that we have a knowledge of something on a soul level, but no knowledge of it here? How are we supposed to accomplish the task? Well, we set ourselves up by possibly choosing a family, choosing an environment. Maybe we have other souls that we have agreements with before we come in, and we say, hey, I'm going to show up in your future, and I'm going to be the bad guy. I'm going to be the foil in your story. You come from a filmmaking background. You understand the concept of the story and how the story arcs and how it changes in the hero's journey. And one of the things that the hero always needs is this challenge in their lifetime. Each soul is on its own unique developmental path. Why one is going to choose some level of suffering over another? Well, let's take it out of that context of suffering. Let's put it into another one. Why does somebody want to climb a friggin' mountain, almost freeze to death, live on rations, sleep on the edge of a mountain, or climb a cliff that they could fall off from at any second and die? Why does somebody base jump? They all have something in them that has this unique and outlier, and they're an outlier in the bell curve, of somebody who wants to seek this incredible challenge. And so they go for that in the physical world. They need it, they want it. It's possible that a soul has that same sense of, I want to get the most powerful experience. I want to have the most incredible challenge that I have to overcome. Fear, hatred, being a victim, pain, suffering. I could overcome that. Can you imagine? Imagine, that's the word I'm looking for. The incredible shine that would come out from that soul's journey of accomplishment through the worst of the human experience. The strength, the power, the development, the expansion of the soul. This is the only way, personally, I can justify in my mind this concept of choosing a life of suffering, or choosing to be at least exposed to it, so they can then have that challenge of overcoming and then being able to expand.
I feel like anytime I've gone through hardships or things that I, as a human being, don't want to be going through, internally, my soul is dancing. My soul is like, oh yeah, give me more. I felt it. It's weird. It's weird. Sometimes I have, I can tap into the bigger picture and identify with my soul, identify with the spiritual side of me way more than the human side. And that's when I begin to understand. That's when I understand that, man, this is making my soul dance. My soul is like excited right now. Like, this is what feeds it. This is the experience that it wants, and to overcome it or to understand it, and it's expanded and it's like dancing out of joy. But as a human being, obviously, sometimes our soul is so much bigger than us as human beings, right? The container that's on the outside. Sometimes it feels overwhelming in this little container. Just the overwhelming feeling of sadness feels like it's too big for this little container. And in those moments, I have been able to identify more or bring out my soul a little bit more and identify with my spiritual side a little bit more, see the bigger picture, to get through it, to get through those moments, to get through those heartbreaking times where it feels like I cannot go through this. This experience is way too big for my little body, for my little human self. Why would I ever sign up for this? And my soul is like, but hey, just, you gotta let me lead. Like, let me lead. And we're gonna get through it. And I want to add something to the forgetting part. Why we have amnesia when we take birth. Why? And I agree with everything that you said. I do believe also that we come to this world wanting to have certain experiences. We sign up, we pick the parents that we pick certain life experiences. Now within that, there's a lot of free will, there's a lot of choices that we can make, but it's like a blueprint, right? Like having a screenplay before you start filming a movie. And within that screenplay, dialogues can be changed, plot can be rewritten, it can go different ways, endings can even be changed, right, while we're filming the movie. Similarly, in that sense, I think that we come into this world with a little bit of like a screenplay. This is how I see my life going, and these are the lessons that I'm going to learn, la-di-da, and then life happens. And forgetting might be necessary, because here's what I heard a long time ago. I can't remember where I heard it, who said it, but the theory or the idea is that way back when this reality was created, let's say Earth, this three-dimensional world was created, we as souls could come in, hop into a body or have a body, have an experience without forgetting who we really are. And we weren't really taking it seriously. We were just like, you know what? Oh, I'm sad. It's okay. I can just go back to where I came from. I'm a soul. Sadness is nothing. And that was the whole point about forgetting that, hey, you need to take this seriously. So like, if you can imagine going into a movie theater, watching a movie, and then thinking, oh, I'm watching a movie, this is nothing. You're not as invested. You're not going through the emotions that the characters are going through. But if you choose to suspend that, awareness for a time being, and then fully immerse yourself in the movie, watch the movie, go through the emotions that the characters are going through, you're going to come out of it and you feel so much like emotionally changed, right? You feel like a changed person. You just had this entire experience just sitting there in the movie theater. So pretty much, I think, yeah, that has always made sense to me, like why we choose amnesia, like why we choose to forget that we are more than this. We are more than just our body, this little container that's containing us. The only way we learn is by fully being immersed in this reality, in this play acting or this movie.
It's the transformative power of the story. In every indigenous culture I've ever learned about, storytelling was always a huge part of the learning experience. And we do that as well on a broader cultural stage in the modern world every day. We just don't, I think about it as the most powerful transformative experience, unless we're really into the study of storytelling. But it's an accurate depiction. And so when we tell a good story, we have the power to help other people transform themselves, to see themselves because they can see themselves in the story, or that they feel uniquely touched by. That's powerful. And so if we're forgetting who or what we are, you're right. I mean, I love that. Actually, that was one thing I hadn't heard, that particular theory before, that there was a time that we knew and we weren't taking it seriously. And it's like, oh, okay, well, we're going to have to put you to the veil of forgetfulness in order for you to take this seriously. Well, that's pretty good. I like that. I'm feeling it. But at the same time, Eckhart Tolle would say, it's very important, this moment right now. You and I sitting here talking, this is the only thing that's happening in our world at this moment. There'll come a time we're going to look back and we'll see a recording of it. It will be now a story. It will now be a story, and maybe a story that other people partake in. But it's not ultimately important. Whatever it is that we think we're going to do, we need to pay the bills. We need to live our calling to the best of our ability, and it's unveiling itself to you each and every moment that is coming to you. Each and every moment, there's something new that arises. And so when you were younger, you were chasing fame, and all of those things were actually a very fateful part of your life, that you needed to go through that stage in order to get to where you're at now, so that you can take that energy and transform it into something else that is an even higher alignment with your calling for what's next. And right now you just graduated, and that's going to carry you into the next thing. Will that be what you do for the rest of your life? You don't know, but the only thing that's important is that you do it right now, because that's what's in front of you right now. And this is what's building on the next thing. If we remembered who and what we were, you're right. I don't think we take it seriously. It would be, the problem is we take it too seriously.
I love this conversation about here and now. And I know we were going to talk about something else for our podcast today. The intention was to talk about relationships and couples counseling, and what happens if you're part of a couple and your partner doesn't want to go to therapy. That's what we initially, that's what I thought. That's what I wanted the topic of this conversation to be. And then you started talking, and I was like, no way, no, let that go. I need to go with this, like this train of thought that's happening here. And yeah, just an example of like honoring what's happening now. And that was absolutely beautiful. Thank you. I was not, expecting to have this conversation about reincarnation and a spiritual conversation, because the spiritual side of me, I kind of keep it hidden, to be honest, especially as a clinician, and coming from a South Asian background. We're very
Yeah.
spiritual people. Hinduism is what I grew up in. We're very spiritual, but it's something that we are ashamed of as a culture. And I think this is a lesson that this is absolutely a lesson, to embody more of that.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't know that. But perhaps things are taking the tide, and that it's changing and shifting, because I think humanity is truly going through a transformational time in our development as a species, and that we are leveling up in our awareness, because the world, unlike any other time in our known history, has this ability to connect instantly. Anything that we do here can be instantly heard and learned. We're watching war on TV like it's a movie. And this is the world we're living in. So now we're all coming to this understanding of our sense of separateness and our sense of oneness all at the same time. And this is the struggle of humanity as a whole. Take ourselves as a species versus the individual, which is why it's so important that each individual person does what they are being called to do, and why that they see themselves through the eyes of compassion, whether they've been through horrible suffering or whether they've had, they would call it egoic leanings. Like in your case, I just wanted to be an actress, just wanted to be famous. Well, I would say to you, that's a very important part of your, not just your journey of learning to move from ego. I don't think so. I think that you learning all of those skills, tools, and abilities is vital to what you're doing next in terms of the calling that you have in this life and what you're here to do and influence. I had an experience once where I went to sleep, and I had it was a very dark night of the soul. I was very depressed, and I had just gone through major life transformation. I had been married in my young adult life, and it was 10 years in, and I left that marriage and moved into the middle of nowhere. I didn't have any friends and no support system. And I went to sleep that night with this very deep, dark sense of, how can I possibly matter? I am the most infinitesimal speck of nothingness in a universe that's continually expanding. How could I possibly matter? And when I went to sleep, I believe I had a visitation and a profoundly spiritual experience. And this booming voice came to me, and it was vibrated within every essence of my being. And it said, we are all the drops in one ocean. And if each and every drop were not of equal value to every other drop, then the ocean would not exist. And when I woke up the next morning, I was just transformed. The depression had lifted. I felt suddenly relevant, and that whatever I was doing had meaning and purpose, no matter how small it seemed to be. And so when I gave you an earlier example of, the wolves in Yellowstone or the bees, could we say one's more valuable than the other? Well, we know if you've kept up with bees, if we take the bees off the planet, we're all probably going to die, right? That's the big story. That each thing is so vital, and that each human being carrying this divine consciousness within it, the soul, is so important, that it is that vital, that whatever you do, whether it's just raising your children, I don't want to say just because that minimizes it, but that it's something as simple seeming as raising a child, and keeping your house clean and cooking nice meals for your family for the rest of your life, and you die with your loved ones around you, or if you are a world leader, Like, it's just as valuable, although not the same. Although not the same. And so you honoring what you've done and where you've been, as you being your own species of animal, that vital to the planet. And so whatever it is that you've done is incredibly important to driving you into the next thing that you're here to do. And it doesn't matter if you reach one or if you reach millions, because we're all one. We're all one. There's no separation. We imagine separation. So I think in this lifetime, we're looking at the world in a big picture. We see ourselves as separate from the rest. But then we're also becoming aware of this knowledge and understanding that we kind of are one. Like what we do here matters across the world. And what I do here on my little microcosm of me matters to the rest of the world.
I feel like I could talk to you for another hour. Like I could have this conversation all day. I do want to wrap up, but I would love to talk to you again anytime about anything. Like about anything. I would just love to have another conversation with you.
Sure.
Thank you so much. And if people want to work with you, I know you also work as a coach, as a grief counselor. And if people want to reach out to you, can they find you? Where can they find you?
They can find me on my website, which is sevillai.love.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. You also brought out a lot in me. Usually I'm kind of guarded about my inner thoughts, my internal life. But I think, thank you. You just brought out a lot in me. And it was so incredible hearing you talk, sharing your experience, and just having this energy exchange, to be honest. I felt like it was just an exchange of energy, and I feel richer for it. So thank you.
Beautiful. Well, I absolutely feel richer for it too, and I feel a lot of synchronicity and being able to meet with you and talk. And honestly, I had an idea of where we're going to go, and well, we just go where we go. And I think that's the beauty of being able to follow that energy and the flow of wherever it goes. So we can talk again, and we could have that conversation about relationship and masculine and feminine energies and all kinds of things. There's no reason that we can't. So I'm absolutely open to that, and it's really been delightful to meet you.